Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. Still to come, last week's Supreme Court ruling marked a big moment for women's rights. Comedy writer Linehan spoke up early, but learned that telling the truth can come at a cost. He'll join us shortly, and we'll be showing you this week's social sensations at the end of the show. You do not want to miss that either. But earlier today, women's rights activist Kellie-Jay held one of her Let Women Speak events at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. Women and men attended the event following the landmark Supreme Court judgment. I'm very, very happy to say joining me now in the studio is Kellie-Jay. Welcome to Free Speech Nation. This might be a less combative interview than you might be used to historically. Would you mind actually we've reached a bit of a crossroads here, I think, in this argument and for fight for women's rights, but I just want to go back a little bit to how you first got involved, like what your first memories are. I saw a clip of you and a bunch of other women, it might even be like 10 years old or something, at an event, and it felt like you were being like chased upstairs and through alleys or something.
Oh, yes,
yeah. Is that how you got involved, or were you involved before that?
No, I got involved before that. So 2015, the Conservatives were voted in. I didn't know that was going to actually happen. I was very comfortable on the left. Joined an online group of women objecting to it, and then it was populated by men. I mean, I say men, I mean truckers. I mean men with wigs who called themselves women. And then I realised you couldn't talk about it, and the women were very cross if you talked about it. So then that's all I wanted to talk about.
So it was women who were very cross initially?
I mean, he was also cross when I said, "Are you sure?" He was like a Bernard Manning. That was his voice. That was what I could hear, is a Bernard Manning sort of sexist. And I just said one day, "You sure you identify as a woman?" And I may as well have said, "Shall we just kill your family?"
Really?
Yeah, it was a huge response.
So it's the silencing or the response to you speaking what you considered to be true and actually turned out to be true legally.
Yes.
That meant that you were like, if I'm going to get pushed back, then I'm going to push back from that point.
Yeah.
So you weren't any kind of activist before this, right?
No, I was a very happy stay-at-home mother. That's my day job. That was what I was doing. And then I just got repeatedly cancelled, often by women. I was asking a question, does my 11-year-old daughter have the right to use a female-only space and not see an adult penis? And you'd think the answer to that was yes, of course. But no, it wasn't. It was that she was a bigot. Why was I raising such a pervert? Transphobic, yada, yada. It was all pretty shocking stuff. And then I just had to find ways of speaking about it. I ended up in a little secret group where actually most of the women that you will have heard of in this fight were in that secret group, and then we all, well, probably fell out, I don't know, I can't remember. But we all ended up doing slightly different things to bring us to this point.
Well, I would say that, for me, I mean, you know, you're certainly one of the most pivotal people in terms of seeing some of your videos, seeing your talks, to clarify the issues at stake, I guess. Also, you've been on various podcasts. What is the response that you've had from people in the street? Or do you think that has changed? Do you think initially no one was really aware of any of this stuff and you've kind of seen this exponential growth?
Well, I think my place in this whole thing was to tell people that it was happening. I sort of felt like I'm the person who raises the alarm. So initially, I think people thought it was a bit of a radical feminist versus poor men in dresses. I think it was sort of seeing two little fringe elements of society. And I don't think people understood that what it meant is just anybody calling themselves a woman could end up in a woman-only space. And I don't think I thought that in the beginning. I had no idea. So 2016 was really sort of my rapid journey into super peaking, where you realise that they're doing it to children, that actually these men... I mean, back in 2016, these men would call themselves trans women, and the idea of them calling themselves female or just women was preposterous. I mean, it is. It is preposterous. The whole thing is nuts. And the fact that anybody takes it seriously it really says something quite terrible about our society.
Well, this is it. It's not that anybody took it seriously, it's that everybody took it seriously in our institutions, politicians, the media. And last week, Supreme Court ruling, of course, do you think that's brought an end to that? Because I naively, I guess, thought, OK, well, that's settled now. But it seems to have created an even larger reaction.
Well, I think the danger when you have a near win, which I think this is like people might feel like it's finished, but it's not. But I think there's a danger now that there will be compromises. That's what really concerns me, because when you know that there's a big fight, then you can fight. But if it's a bit of we sort of won, it becomes more difficult, I think, to get people to fight it. Keir Starmer, I think he'll just put it to the side. There's been clarity. Did you know there's been clarity?
Always been clarity.
So he'll be talking about that. They'll push it over to the EHRC. I think the EHRC has been dreadful. I think it's been dreadful since the Equality Act, since 2010. We shouldn't have needed a clarification. It shouldn't have taken 3 brave women from Scotland to actually get it to the Supreme Court. So there'll be a lot of people who now are like, oh, my goodness, thank goodness, there is clarity. We can just pretend these were our policies all along and we couldn't really help it. So there will be those. But then there'll be activists, there'll be people that are unionised, so anybody remotely connected to any of the unions, teachers. There will be, I've had communication from women in hospitals where they've already had internal communication that their hospital is going to try and find a way not to adhere to these this ruling at the Supreme Court. But we have to remember this was a ruling on clarification. Nothing has changed. There is no reason that anybody who suddenly realises that men aren't welcome in women-only spaces, there's no reason that they should have thought that an hour before the ruling.
Yeah. And do you think that the fight continues? Do you think there is a fight there? Is it that every institution needs to be uprooted? Because we are seeing a lot of denialism, a lot of, I've seen various things put out from theatres and different groups and organisations. We support trans people. We're not going to go along with this ruling. I saw something interesting was that everybody will come into line because they have to obtain public insurance, and they're not going to be able to obtain it if they don't meet the requirements of the... So that, I thought, was quite an interesting element that maybe isn't being focused on yet.
I mean, money, right? At the end of it, is it going to cost the money? And if it is, then that's a great thing. I'd like to see us criminalise men and services that allow men in women-only spaces. I would like to see some sort of really clear action from the government on this.
You have support here, but we had a government minister on telly today talking about the opposite of that there isn't going to be anybody who criminalises it, there isn't going to be this kind of policed.
Yeah.
The analogy that would be that I've sort of seen online this week that seems to work is the difference is what we know now is that men don't have the right to be in women's toilets. So it's not about having someone out in front of the door questioning. The point is it's not just this entitled, given right. Just like, and the people have pointed out, we don't have someone checking your licence every time you get into a car.
Yeah.
The point is, it's the law. Then you follow the law, or there are possible consequences afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's somewhat self-policing. All it takes is a few people, or 1 or 2 people, to be arrested for invading different space. And that
absolutely. And also I think if councils are liable for their own property, so they're then liable if they don't effectively keep men out, or restaurants or bars or any of these places where they're not adhering to the law, I'd like to see some penalties. If I go into a restaurant and they've got mouldy food in there and the health and safety executive come in, something happens to that restaurant. So I don't know why it would be any different if we subject women to an unsafe environment by inserting a man in there.
But in that case, it seems that every restaurant, every theatre, every public space needs to be called to account in that way, which is obviously a huge amount of work, as opposed to them doing the policing themselves. Yeah,
well, I think you need a little bit of both, don't you? There needs to be carrot and stick, and I'm a real big fan of sticks.
Yes. Well, look, speaking of...
So sorry.
Enough about your private life. I was wondering whether for you, if I know this isn't the end, but if it is at least a resting point, to look backwards over the last decade, Are you not happy with it, but are you... what are your emotional feelings about the way it's happened? Is there anger there? I mean, anger with our society that it went that far, the cost that has been paid by women like yourselves?
Yeah. Look, I think that there are significant costs of individual women that will never know who they are or what's really happened to them, but we know that there's plenty of them. So that's something to be quite angry about. Also that at any moment, our government, I mean, I talked about this afternoon, our government shut down a whole country, like, for no reason really, but they shut down a whole country. And to say that they can't do something really significant about this is nonsense. But I think what we have to acknowledge is underpinning this, the reason this particular ideology could take hold is because we live in a society that doesn't really like or respect women very much. And so there's going to be other battles in different shapes that are fundamentally at the foundation of which will be misogyny.
Well, this is a really interesting point because it was predominantly led by women. And do you think that was important or the most important element of this?
Yeah, yes and no. I think it had to be, women had to be the main voices in this because
I've been to your events. I mean, I've hung out in the background. It's only women who speak. I found it very difficult.
Clues in the name. Clues in the name.
Yeah.
Let women speak.
Let women speak.
Yeah.
But I really would... No, OK, fine. But yes, having women arguing for women's rights is obviously going to be much more impactful.
Yeah.
So how it's going to directly impact you.
Yes, I mean, occasionally it is like herding cats, but other than that, I think the main voices have to be... When it comes to women's rights...
Just try being a Jewish advocate. See how that goes.
But, I mean, it has to be women's voices because we're the only ones that genuinely know what it feels like when there is a male voice in a female-only space. It just totally changes it. And I'm sure that men feel the same when there's a woman in their space. I'm not saying it changes it in the same way, but it certainly will change a conversation. So it has to be our voices. And I'm happy for men to stand beside women on this issue, but I really, really don't want any men standing in front of us. I don't think that's their place at all. That really undermines everything that we want to do in this movement. And I hope this continues. I hope women have learned that actually when it comes to what's happening to us, that we are the best people to talk about it. And we see it even in this movement that women often defer to men and start celebrating a man for doing something like relatively basic. So, you know, but these are women.
Guys, it's very difficult to present a TV show.
But this, I mean, look, we're women, so we're also socialised as women. So there's often it's a different set of rules, and maybe one of the reasons that some of the women are prominent, probably myself included, is because we buck some of the trends. Like I'm annoyingly confident. And that really doesn't sit well with some women. And I just hope what this thing has done is it's galvanised some women. I think maybe it gave us a fight that we A, didn't want, but B, the benefit is that we look to other women from all different walks of life. You know, I've had a Russian Orthodox, very devout woman standing next to a radical feminist lesbian, and they have just been there as women, and probably their paths would not necessarily have crossed had this thing not come along. So there have been some upsides, for sure.
Because there's this idea that gender ideology broke the brain of the world, or the Western world. But do you think that the lessons that have been learned through this fight might actually help to fix it? And I'm not just talking about escaping gender ideology. There are other issues that you also publicly speak about. Some I agree with, some I don't. But the point is that by being this kind of accidental activist, the inspiration of other people to speak up and not to just automatically trust our media sources, any media source. Yeah.
Well, I think what we've all learned is how slippery people who have public platforms are and how much they're willing to lie just to get on. So that's quite a good thing. Just being able to speak about... It doesn't really matter if you're right or wrong or whether you sort of agree with everybody else speaking on an issue. I think just being able to speak and just thinking, right, I'm just going to say it because I mean it and I think it, and I'd like to share this idea with someone, and I'm happy to disagree with people. So maybe it will give people a little bit of confidence when it comes to just speaking about things that they feel strongly about, or even not strongly about, just speaking. Because we've lost it. We've lost the art of conversation.
Do you think part of that might be because of sort of purity politics? I know that coming from the left, and it was realising that the left is fallible that then led me down the road going, oh, well, if Corbynism, and wait a minute, maybe we're not all wonderfully anti-racist as I thought that we were, and oh, look, there's a lesbian over here being beaten up by a biological male and being seemingly, and the male is being said what a great anti-bigot they are.
Yes.
I wonder how many people sort of will move on from speaking up on this issue to speak out about other issues that concern us.
Well, I damn well hope so, because otherwise what a waste of an opportunity. But people are afraid. I tell you what I don't get. I don't get someone seeing this issue for what it is, a big fat lie, and seeing that all the mainstream, people in power, everybody just went along with this stuff, and they're not understanding that is happening in loads of issues all over the country. And I also think our government seems to try to want to make us feel really, really angry with all this gaslighting and dishonesty. And so I just think we all have to step back and think, what is being asked of us? Is it that we suddenly start rioting in the streets and get really angry? And how can we stop that? How can we not give them what they want? And the only answer to that is to speak and to kind of thrash it out verbally before it gets to violence.
Well, I guess to be engaged would be the first step. And I wonder how much it feels like a big crossover moment in the argument was when Ilo Bryce and you have a male rapist going to a female jail. Friends of mine in my liberal little enclave would sort of be like, oh, it's a non-issue, this whole, why are you interested in this, why are you talking about this all the time? Because it felt to me so pivotal. But when that happened, and when people could see very clearly where this ideology lent, the silent majority, it feels like that's when they spoke up or made themselves aware, and that's when Labour and all the different political parties really had to start grappling with it, because they were like, most people go, no, this is wrong.
Yeah.
I think to be British, there's that focus on fairness, and I don't think anyone sane anyway would look at that situation of a male rapist in a female jail and go, yeah, that's right, that's fair.
I mean, for those of us that have been sort of involved in this for a long time, I think we thought sterilising children might be the thing that people thought that's pretty bad, or certainly rapists in women's prisons. But there's been so many things, women being convicted of crimes of like having stickers or calling some repulsive man online, I think he was called a pig. I mean, I had someone send me a £10,000 money claim on the basis that I called him a misogynist. When I say someone, I mean a misogynist sent me a £10,000 money claim.
It's £20,000 now.
But I've been interviewed, 3 times by the police? I mean, all these things, you'd think that it would make normal people wake up. But I guess whatever it is that wakes them up, but they just can't go back to sleep again, because that would be unforgivable.
Well, I would argue that you've woken many, many people, and you've done a fantastic job. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a massive round of applause. Next on Free Speech Nation, we are going to be talking to comedy writer, legend, Graham Linehan. He spoke up early as well. He's here to talk about his experiences. You don't want to miss it. Thank you very much, Kellie.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Last week's Supreme Court ruling was a defining moment in the fight for women's rights, but it's been a long time coming and a difficult journey for many people. One of the first to pop their heads above the parapet was university-loved comedy writer Graham Linehan, but he found out that telling the truth, unfortunately, comes with a price. Well, I am honoured to be joined now by comedian and writer, creator of Father Ted and Black Books, and also my board game buddy, Graham Linehan.
Thank you.
Here he is. Is it over?
You wouldn't think so from all the commentators who seem to think that saying that a woman has a foo-foo and a man has a willy is the most confusing judgment And it's kind of knocked them all for six, you know. What does this mean?
Yeah, what is biology?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it just means that you go back to what we've had for 100 years until the Tumblr people came along and persuaded everybody that some lesbians have a penis, you know? And it's that simple. And unfortunately, you got people like Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell who've been... Yeah.
Our next guest is Rory Stewart.
You get who I think are emblematic of a lot of people in this fight, in that they basically been hoodwinked by their idiotic kids, you know, and their very comfortable wives. Who, I mean, I met one person. Actually, it was Jimmy Mulville of Hat Trick Productions who was responsible for banning the Father Ted musical.
There was a Father Ted musical?
Yeah, there was.
That was a joke. I follow Graham on Twitter, so...
yeah, I sometimes mention it. But like I remember he said to me, my wife says it's not a problem, you know? And these are the very privileged wives of very privileged people. All of them are Cambridge, Oxford types, you know, and I realised, you know, sometime into this fight that I was being kind of spat out by the elite middle class, you know, to whom I thought I belonged when I was in the media. But I realised that came with certain conditions. Yeah.
Don't speak up, don't rock the boat.
Don't tell the truth, don't defend women, don't complain about children being mutilated, you know. And I still feel that, you know, it's been a great week and I'm very, very happy we got the result we did. The Supreme Court said something that got me banned from Twitter for 2 years, which is that men are men and women are women. But I still think there's a lot to be done. I still think children are being told that they're the opposite sex. They're having operations. There's a group of hospitals in the US that have just been found out to have been doing these operations on kids. And I think that we need jail terms for all the doctors who took part in this, you know? So...
Well, that's it. In America, it's a slightly different situation because of their healthcare system and the incentives to medicalise this condition, and arguably it came over here.
Yes, it's an American movement. You know, I mean, you had the extraordinary sight of left-wingers taking part in the civil rights movement that enriched plastic surgeons and big pharma. You know, and they managed to convince useful idiots over here. You know, I could name a bunch of Billy Bragg.
Just follow him on X.
Billy Bragg, Laurie Penny, Owen Jones, all these. Neil Gaiman, exactly, who turned out to be a sadistic sex criminal, allegedly.
Allegedly!
And these are all people who, as Kemi Badenoch said about Keir Starmer, bent the knee to an American fad. I mean, it's very interesting. We noticed with Laurie Penny, she keeps talking about the bathroom bill. What English person calls the toilet a bathroom? And it's because they're all completely swayed by Americans, you know? So it's true that, you know, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. And in this case, America sneezed and lots of kids cut their breasts off, you know?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're seeing the support of that in the streets. We saw it last week. We saw these protests. We saw the violence
that was
towards
great,
women, the placards and the...
I couldn't have been happier. It was like a 1-2 punch. First of all, the Supreme Court came along and said men are men and women are women. And then trans activists showed what they've been doing to many of the women who are here today. I saw women kettled. You know, in Australia, there was psychotic violence against the police and women, and signs that say the only good turf is a dead turf, and so on and so forth. This is stuff that we've been putting up for years. No one else has seen it. And now what's great about these protests is that they're coming out, and they've been kind of steeped in a kind of sea of thinking this is normal. But as soon as ordinary people see what's actually happening, see what these people actually believe, they reject it, you know, because it's mad.
Well, I would argue with this talk of toilets, what's happened this week is that the general public are seeing for the first time what is meant by trans women.
Yes.
Some trans women, because I think a lot of people... Everybody wants to be a good person. We all want people to feel safe and right. Everybody in our
Sure.
society have that. And I think when a lot of people who aren't initiated into this, who haven't seen some of the things that we might have seen, would think of a trans woman as someone who's presenting, who passes, as the parlance goes. But what we've seen out on some of these protests and people being interviewed is, frankly, sexualized men.
Yeah, I mean...
There was a thing today talking about how 99% of rapists are men.
Yeah.
That's true. It's 100% technically, legally. But what's not talked about is, as heterosexual men, and what's not talked about is what percentage of what we understand in our society to be trans women is heterosexual men.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, there's a kind of a battle within the gender critical movement over the phrase, I think the phrase is true trans, you know, and I get into trouble for supporting, you know, certain trans identified men in this fight. But all the men I support, they admit they're men. You know, they don't believe that they've changed sex. They just say, well, I just feel comfortable in these clothes and that's it. And most of them don't. In fact, I think all of them that I support don't use women's spaces.
Well, their rights don't conflict then.
Yes, exactly.
And of course, everybody, of course, deserves safety. And as was pointed out by the Supreme Court, this doesn't affect trans rights. I know they're saying it does, but it doesn't.
Well, look at what happens when you suggest third spaces. They go nuts because the truth is that, like they say this every time I have this list of 227 men who have been convicted of sexual offences, paedophilia and other crimes against women. And all of it, when you think about it, that's 227 men, but their victims must be multiplied. You know what I mean? So we're not talking 227 victims. And it's people always say, well, why don't you list cis men? Why don't you talk about the cis men who do it? They are cis men. They're cis men dressed as women. It's that simple. And for some reason, all these idiots like, you know, Rory Stewart and all these people, they've convinced themselves that if you put on a dress, it's like you turn into Mr. Ben. It's like a magical kind of door into a different world.
I mean, these are some people. And then, of course, you know, trans people believing that they are the opposite sex is a real condition. And
I don't know.
Well, I mean... Well, it's a belief. No, sure. I'm not saying it has medical fact, but there are people who do genuinely believe that they are the opposite sex.
What did they do in caveman times? Did they wear the furs of the opposite sex? Do you know what I mean? I just don't see it as a... I mean, I do realise that some people are uncomfortable and they want to dress as women and all that sort of thing. But a lot of that is fetishistic. And I do not see why fetishistic men should be allowed in spaces with women. It's that simple.
No, I think that's fair enough. And if it's not fetishistic, I agree as well. That's the point now, is that women's spaces are now finally defined. I want to talk about, if you don't mind, talking about a little bit about the cost to you in terms of your work. I know you, and people know you as, you know, frankly, if you don't mind me saying this, but one of the great comedy writers of our era, if not all time. Don't want to suck up too much. But when you go through something like this, and possibly now, hopefully, coming out the other side of it, are you changed forever? Are you planning on getting back to writing comedy? Can you write comedy? Can what's happened to you, these circumstances, enrich your comedy in any way? Or are we just too close to think about all of that?
I'm a little nervous about my ability to write comedy. A lot of my comedy came from a feeling that people are basically good and silly and nice, and they try to get things right and they screw up. But the last few years have been really shocking to me. You know, I mean, I have to say, it's not just my colleagues in comedy. Arthur Matthews, who was my greatest friend and completely betrayed me by trying to get my name taken off the TED musical. That really hits hard, you know. But also, I have to say, I've had a lot of trouble from, my own side in this. I had this kind of rosy view that because I was fighting the good fight, I would find a lot of solidarity. But unfortunately, there's certain things that happen that are in some cases as bad as what was done to me on the other side. I went to visit Magdalene Burns when she was dying. She was the YouTuber who, just a wonderful woman, brilliant speaker, communicator on these issues. And, you know, my own side just kind of managed to, kicked up such a stink that I had to eventually ask the family to make a statement defending me. So it kind of confused me how much politics there are in this fight. And I still feel a little let down by it. And it's another reason why I want to get out of the UK, you know? I mean, I'm being hounded by trans activists still, hounded by the police. And, you know, as you know, Josh, you're very, you know, obviously this affects you more than it does me, but I think the anti-Semitism in the UK has just gotten out of control. And I think it's the left, you know? I think the left have just become the opposite of what they used to be. You know, if we talk about, I remember someone was saying, I think it was the Battle of Cable Street, you know, and we saw off the fascists. Well, now the same people would be giving them an escort, you know, and I don't recognise the left. I don't recognise the country anymore. And, you know, when I got here, it was 90s, it was Britpop, it was a really kind of creative, wonderful time. I think the arts are dead in the UK. When was the last time you saw a great sitcom? You know, it wasn't Smoggy Queens. You know, when was the last time you saw a band that kind of that made you want to get into a stadium with thousands of people and sing along? I feel like we've been running in place culturally since this idiotic movement started.
Five has reformed.
Huh?
Five has reformed.
Oh, have they?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's different. I'm staying.
But, you know, with all of that, though, what has happened is speaking up for truth. And I'm just trying to put an optimistic spin on these things, because I think that many more people, even just people here this evening who've come out, people like yourself, standing up for truth is something that just didn't seem to happen in the 90s, or maybe we just trusted, or whatever it is. But now there's a cynicism there, but there's also there's activism, and I see that as a good thing. And I wonder if 20 years from now you look back and we're talking about you, and you look back at your career, and it's creator of Father Ted and creator of other sitcoms that you're going to come over that will make it sounds like maybe some horror films. But also someone who stood not just for women's rights, but stood for truth. And I think that's a journey that a lot of us are on now because of this one topic has led us to speak up.
Oh yeah, and I think the great thing about it is that we'll never take our rights for granted again. I think every woman who's here knows that now you have to man the barricades. Yeah. You know, because a lot of men just despise women. And this has been, I think the trans movement to a large degree was a trolling exercise. I think there were a lot of men who just saw it as a chance to get back at the women who rejected them, the women who, you know, they hate. And I feel glad that, you know, it's kind of energised the feminist movement here. Tariff Island has been a beacon for the rest of the world. And I know that's having an effect in America and elsewhere. You know, it's all crumbling now.
Well, you're a massive part of that, ladies and gentlemen. Big round of applause, please, for Graham Linehan. Thank you very much.